DawgNation, and welcome back to DawgNation at Large. As always, I'm Kaylee Mansel with DawgNation insider Connor Riley. Connor, my statement to open up the show today is very simple. Just give me my money.
No, I'm not doing this. No.
So
I know you're a prankster, and I know we're not divulging in this. This is not fun. This is not cool.
So you're going to do the brat TikTok dance on this show, but you won't do the Cash Jones touchdown celebration that we got on Saturday?
No, that's not the Cash Jones touchdown celebration. Please, we'll let Cody handle the Cash Jones talk. I mean, I'll dance. I'll do any TikTok dance you want, but pranking people is just decidedly not cool.
Quite frankly, I'm just surprised that this is where you draw the line on all the things that we've done to open up the show. This is where Connor says, no, I'm good.
No, because I think that's lame. Because I think that TikTok trend is lame.
Okay, well, if there's anything that we learned about last week's show, it's that you should probably not listen to Connor, that you should probably always listen to Cody, but more on that later. For now, this is DawgNation at Large.
It's the show for the new breed of Georgia Bulldog fan. This is DawgNation at Large with DawgNation insiders Connor Riley and Kaylee Mansel.
All right, DawgNation, this is DawgNation at Large. We are in week 2 of the season, have a lot in store for you on today's show. Here's what we've got going on here on DawgNation at Large. Starting with the fact that the new playmakers and the true freshmen really shined in game 1. Then we've got a lot to cover, not just from what happened at Clemson, but previewing Tennessee Tech, amongst other things that happened in college football this week. So it was a perfect time to do a dog bite segment. Now, if you've been with us for a while, you may have seen us do Meme Machine every few episodes here, but now that college football is back and the internet is in full swing, we're going to do one Meme Machine a week. And then at the end, I told you guys last week it was put your money where your mouth this time, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to hold an accountability check hosted by Cody on all the things that we got right and wrong from last week. But let's start with this. 13 freshmen played in the opener versus Clemson. Before we break it all down, Connor, I have to ask, were you surprised that this many freshmen saw the field on Saturday?
When you get up 34-3 in the fourth quarter and the game's sort of over one drive in, I'm not surprised. And that's where some of those numbers, the Daniel Calhouns, Jazeer Jackson's getting into the game, Jordan Thomas, for example. I think when that game was such a blow, that's when you get those guys in. But from the jump, obviously Nate Frazier leading the team in rushing, KJ Bolden leading the defense in snaps. They're going to find ways to get freshmen onto the field. And it wasn't just those two. Joseph Ajone played a role for this team. Yes, most of those 13 freshmen came in when this was a blowout. And, we would obviously kick around the idea that if Georgia does get up big, they're going to want to try and play these freshmen early. But they have guys in this 2024 signing class that they're clearly counting on to play big roles, meaningful minutes in the early part of the season, and we saw that in the first Saturday.
Yeah, in case you missed it or haven't seen it this week, these are the 13 freshmen that got the opportunity to play on Saturday. Of course, the ones that you might recognize, KJ Bolden and Nate Frazier. KJ playing on the first drive of the game. Nate Frazier, you saw what y'all saw what he did out there. But I think in looking at this, one that stands out to me are the defensive linemen that got to play, and Joseph Ajone as well as Jordan Thomas, because considering where the defensive line stands right now in health, I think that I'm glad we got to see them get reps.
Yeah, no, this is a position of concern for Georgia, obviously. And, Jordan Hall coming back from an injury, Xavier McLeod still dealing with an abdominal strain. And then you have Warren Brinson exit the game on the second drive there on Saturday. You're going to need to build depth there on this defensive line. Now, fortunately for Georgia, it sounds like all those defensive line injuries that they're dealing with at the moment aren't long-term injuries. And so what you might be able to do is buy these guys, some of those veterans, some time before you say go and play Alabama at the end of the month, while getting your Joseph Ajone, your Jordan Thomases some more reps. That way, hey, for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 plays, they might be able to come in and give you something, because as great as Georgia played on Saturday, as well as Christian Miller, Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, and Nazir Stackhouse played, especially without Brinson for a large majority of that game, you can't expect them to play 30 snaps a game and make it fresh through the end of the season. I think you saw with Stackhouse in particular last year wear down at the end of the season. The big stat, most obviously, I've referenced this a bunch. Nazir Stackhouse played more snaps in the first 12 games last season than Jordan Davis played in the entirety of the 2021 season. Wow. So if you're able to get those guys playing time and get those guys reps, it's going to have a benefit and keep your defense fresh on the back end, even if you do have a little bit of growing pains on the front.
So obviously, in light of what KJ and Nate did, as well as how many freshmen got to play, this was a humongous storyline coming out of Clemson. And when Kirby was in his press conferences earlier this week, he was asked about it. Here's Kirby Smart on playing freshmen.
I don't know about playing time. I think we can disprove that with the guys that have started and played. It may get used, but it doesn't work very effectively because we have as many freshman All-Americans and as many freshmen play as anybody in the country. So I don't know how effective it is, but I don't know. I would be interested to see how 13 compared to other years. Obviously, the type of game you play in would dictate that, meaning, last year we probably had more than 13 play because of the score and the differential. A couple years ago against Clemson, we probably didn't have many. I know one that did, but I don't know many more than that one. But every year it's different. It's about their development. I think so many freshmen across the country right now are so caught up in, am I going to play? Am I going to play this week? Am I going to travel? What am I doing? Did I make the right decision? Because all they got to think about is the alternative of where I can go. And if you just be where your feet are and get better, you'll come out on top in the end. No. They're having to play out of necessity, having to play out of the fact that we got more transient rosters. I mean, they're not any more ready to play physically, mentally, that disposition. No, not many freshmen are. Let me say this. Playing in our league, SEC to SEC, if you're playing with a lot of freshmen, you're in trouble because they're not physically developed. That doesn't mean one can't do it, but you don't want to be out there playing with a lot of freshmen.
I know it was a long clip. There's a lot to break down from it, but this is where I want to start. I think it was at the beginning of the clip. He's talking about how he wants to see how many played this year in comparison to other years, where it be UT Martin last year or the first time or the time that they played Clemson in 2021. I think for me, it's not necessarily about how many people played on the field, but who they were able to play against. It's not UT Martin. It's not Tennessee Tech. It's the fact that our freshmen got reps against an AP top 25 opponent. That's what separates not just the talent we have in the freshman class, but the talent that we have on the entire field, Connor.
Well, they're not our freshmen. They're the University of Georgia's freshmen. But I will say, I think going forward, the fact that Nate Frazier is already clearly building buzz and is going to be, I think, one of the top running backs potentially in college football this year, even with a potential eventual return of Trevor Etienne there. Obviously, KJ Bolden, a well-known five-star recruit there. But even guys like a Jordan Thomas, if he's able to carve out a role, those guys to me are perhaps more interesting than the five stars that you're going to be able to get and come in, and there's the expectation that those guys have playing time. KJ Bolden, Joseph Jonah, Ajane there. When you're able to get quality reps out of, say, guys like a Jordan Thomas, potentially like a Sokovie White, I think that's where you really begin to dispel the notion that, hey, we don't play freshmen here. And look, it's easy to point to that because Georgia's rosters are so loaded and they send so many guys to the NFL every year. You wonder, how do we ever get on the field with some of this? But there's been a pretty consistent track record, as Kirby Smart points out, of them getting guys on the field early as freshmen. Malaki Starks, the big interception against Oregon 2 years ago. Michael Williams actually started that game for Georgia. So this is hardly anything new. And even going back to the early days of Kirby Smart, where you had Andrew Thomas starting game one there at right tackle, up through now, even as Georgia has morphed into a championship program, they've always shown that they're going to play you if you're good enough. And there are always players in Georgia's recruiting classes that are good enough to play right away.
There's another thing that he talks about in that first question he answered about the freshmen worrying about playing time and how there's always, you can look at the alternative. But I do feel like in coming to Georgia, yes, NIL is going to play a certain amount, but also the freshmen that you're picking up have to buy what you're selling. They have to understand that they're is a chance that you might not see the field as many times as you want freshman year, but that's all for a reason, and it's all going to work out in the end. I think with what we see going on with teams like Florida State right now who have leaned heavy on the transfer portal, it's the freshmen that they're lacking that aren't buying into what the program is selling. It's hurting them on the field right now, and you could see that with other programs, but not with Georgia.
Well, I think it helps too that Georgia is at a point in its program under Kirby Smart now where it's year 9. And so, like Malaki Starks knows what it was like to play as a freshman and how hard that was, and thus can help some of those young players come in and contribute right away. But the other point of it too, like you understand why it's difficult for some freshmen in the transition they make, because in coming from high school, they were the best player on the field every time, and they were probably the best players on their team. And in some cases, they were the best players from the time they stepped on the field as freshmen, as 14-year-olds in high school. So I think that's a big adjustment to where now you're playing against almost grown men, certainly in some of the cases where you have COVID guys being held back. So I think that adjustment is big. And the fact that Georgia's still even able to navigate that is the weirdness of college football in recent years because of that extra year that was granted by COVID. For example, Matt Stackhouse is in his 5th year in this program. Xavier Truss on the offensive side of the ball is a 6-year offensive tackle. There's just a height and weight difference that if you're a freshman defensive end going against Xavier Truss, you're just not going to be able to overcome. So I think there's an understanding there. And the fact that Georgia pretty consistently across the position, it's not just like wide receiver every year, they're always bringing in an elite guy. You've seen them do it at wide receiver, tight end, running back, defensive back, even linebacker last year with CJ Allen and Raylan Wilson. You've seen Georgia consistently almost all over the field find ways to get freshmen onto the field.
Let's talk about this second half of what he said regarding the transient rosters that freshmen are having to play. Somebody must have gotten Kirby Smart a dictionary recently because he's pulling out some pretty big words. I had to look it up just to be 100% certain of what he meant. I think if depth and longevity are truly a nationwide problem, like Kirby Smart saying, I know that he doesn't want to call attention to this, but I'll take my chances on the 5 stars and All-Americans and the #1 class in the country. So, I get why he approaches this question in the way that he does a little bit, but you can't take away the 13 that we saw on there and their background. It's not like that anywhere else except for maybe Ohio State.
And Ohio State's not playing, the same volume of freshmen. No. Granted, Ohio State's not playing anybody, so I'm sure they got plenty of freshmen in against Akron. But I think when you're Georgia and when you're Kirby Smart, like there is some concern there when it comes to veteran players in your program. I think of the 85 players on scholarship, I believe I did this math a few weeks ago. Only like 27 of them are in their 3rd year with this Georgia program. So much of this, both via the transfer portal, in addition to these recruiting classes as well, you're just not seeing the same level of veterans that you used to be. Certainly in that 2021 team that was so veteran laden. And thus, going into that next year, that's why there was just so little belief that Georgia could repeat. And I think now, as we've sort of gotten a further understanding of what college football and the roster turnover is going to look like every year, we're more developed and have a better idea of what comes with the transfer portal. The reality is you're going to have to get young guys ready to play earlier than ever. And it's not just young guys, but guys new to your system. Stanford tight end Ben Yurosek was a guy that had played a ton of football at Stanford. He didn't necessarily have the greatest debut there. Mm-hmm. So I think it's imperative, not just with freshmen, but first-year players in general, you're going to have to play more and more of them moving forward because of the transfer portal and what it has all done to college football. And Georgia has shown that, and they've understood that. And when you're able to bring in an elite recruiting class every single year like Georgia is, and also find what you want out of the transfer portal rather than necessarily what you need to get out of the transfer portal, you're able to find, I think, the balance that you saw Georgia find against Clemson on Saturday.
So if we look ahead to this Saturday versus Tennessee Tech, more freshmen are going to play in this game, especially to ensure a healthy roster moving forward. Their first game nerves, a lot of them are out of the way. They're going to be ready to play. But when you look at the game as a whole, in what position groups can freshmen help the most on Saturday?
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing what we see out of Nate Frazier again and Chauncey Bones there as well. Some of that can, yes, be tied to the uncertainty of Trevor Etienne. But if Trevor plays, I'm interested in seeing how Georgia works things out with Nate Frazier, because as high as expectations are for Trevor Etienne, Nate Frazier looked really darn good against a really stout Clemson team and made a difference in that game. They weren't running the ball well in the first half, and when they started giving him more carries, I think you saw that extra gear make a difference against Clemson. So I think that's a position there. And then in the secondary as well, because, yes, KJ Bolden obviously dominates a lot of coverage there, but Ellis Robinson was a guy that played a good bit in that game, and I'm interested in seeing what we continue to see out of Ellis, and can he factor into that cornerback rotation? Can he get into that secondary rotation? Because they have a lot of talented guys there, but Ellis is as good as anyone in there. So I think running back, once again, for off-field reason perhaps, And then the secondary there as well are the two spots where you're going to see freshmen, obviously with KJ and Nate having the games that they had, but there are all guys behind them as well that I think Georgia's going to be eager to get on the field. Chauncey Bowens in particular, with the struggles that Branson had in his first game, maybe that's someone you give the ball a little bit more to as you try and wait for Roderick Robinson to return from injury.
So in just a minute, we'll talk about injury updates, Florida State, Malaki Starks. But first, we want to remind you guys that we are so excited to have Zagoria Law Firm here as a partner on DawgNation. One thing we love about Zagoria Law Firm is that they are the only law firm in the state that specializes in representing people bitten by dogs. That's right. They're the official dog bite injury lawyers of the Georgia Bulldogs. They wrote the book on how to win these cases. So if you or a loved one has been hurt by someone else's dog, make sure to give them a call at 833-GA-DOG-BITE. That's DOGBITE. Or visit ZagoriaLaw.com. That's ZagoriaLaw.com. And we are happy to have them as our sponsor here on our segment we like to call Dog Bites. All right, let's go ahead and get this one out of the way. Injury update. What did you learn this week? Status of Michael, Janelle, anything else we need to know?
Yeah, don't expect to see Michael Williams this week. He wasn't practicing when we last spoke to Kirby Smart on Tuesday. I would maybe look for the Alabama game as a realistic return for him there. I think he'll travel with the team to Kentucky, but I don't know if he's going to play a role there. I would expect Janelle Aguero to play on Saturday. It sounds like he's doing better recovering from a soft tissue injury. Unfortunately, I can't offer anything more specific when it comes to an injury there, but I think he's trending in the right direction. Warren Brinson, we'll see. I think Jordan Hall is probably still a week away on that defensive line there, but it sounds like he might potentially be able to go against Kentucky. Xavier McLeod maybe a little bit further behind that there. And then as for Trevor Etienne and his status, we are not going to touch that. We know exactly where Georgia stands with that right now.
Do we know when Rod Robinson might make his return?
I think it's going to be a while from him. He had toe surgery, and so, again, you break this down into schedules. It wouldn't surprise me if he's actually held out through that second bye week, and maybe the Florida game is when he potentially might return. But not a lot of clarity has been offered there on that in terms of a timeline or a potential return.
This would not be a complete show if we didn't talk about Florida State, who cannot seem to escape the state of Georgia. You lose to Georgia in the Orange Bowl by 60 points. And then you lose to Georgia Tech game one in a different continent, I might add. And then you come back home and you lose to Boston College, whose quarterback was a quarterback at Ware County. I feel like the state of Georgia might be public enemy number one now for Florida State, and I can't get enough of it.
I mean, I'm surprised you're giving Thomas Castellanos some love here. I know you're notoriously anti-South Georgia, but I thought that game on
tired.
I thought that Boston College came out and played a really strong game, had a great game plan. And if you're Florida State, it's a really tough start to the season. And I think the biggest thing is just they've missed on a couple of quarterback evaluations, and they had to bring in a guy in DJ Uiagalelei. And so DJ just has not been a very good player there. I'm surprised they're still sticking with him. Maybe there were guarantees or assurances made, but I think the problems there on offense have impacted the defense because they've gotten off to slow starts in both those games and have really, I think, allowed that defense to be on the field longer than they needed to. And because Florida State just hasn't recruited at an elite level from the high school ranks, they don't have this top-end depth necessarily. And so when you lose a massive draft class like they did from last year and don't have a wave of great recruits, they've been recruiting better under Norvell, but not on a year-in, year-out basis. You see what happens when you're just on the field all the time, you're getting worn out. And if that's happening this early in the season, imagine what's going to happen later in the year when you start playing a Clemson, a Notre Dame, a Florida later in the year. Now, I know two of those teams looked absolutely atrocious in week one. But when you start playing higher caliber teams in terms of blue chip talent, you have to wonder how this team is going to hold up and make it through the season.
I don't think that I've heard you pronounce DJU's last name the same twice. Like, I feel like
it's DJ Uiagalelei. I
don't even think that you said it the same like you did when you were talking about him.
Yeah, I did.
All right.
I did. DJ, I got. Nico, I still got time. I still got like another 6 weeks to learn Nico.
But also, with that being said, CJ Wiley, we are ready for you to enter the chat at any moment. All right.
Kevin Wynn, too. Don't sleep on Kevin Wynn.
Hey, he was on the Before the Hedges top targets last night, so I thought that was a pretty good sign. We'll take him all.
But you didn't want to bring him up. You're just so focused on CJ.
Okay, whatever. Malaki Starks. I mean, you could probably put him at 5 positions on the defense and he would still be the best one in that position. I loved seeing him at star. I think it just provides stability and allows him to impact the game at any given moment, and also an ability for teams to avoid him offensively. I know that we'll have Janelle back after this, but this was a really great surprise for game 1 in my opinion.
Yeah, you took the words right out of Kirby Smart's mouth in terms of his ability to play multiple positions there. I think part of it was how limited Clemson's passing offense was, and that's why they felt comfortable making this move there. But ultimately, I think they know that against elite passing offenses that they're going to need Malaki to play at that safety spot to try and cover things off in the back end rather than playing closer to the line of scrimmage and using his physicality in that way. But it speaks to what an incredible athlete, an incredible player, an incredible person that Malaki Starks is. Obviously, the interception earns a lot of the notes there, but he was having a standout game before that. And what him moving to star allows Georgia to do is it keeps KJ Bolden back there in that sort of free safety mold where he's allowed to go back and play more center field. And that allows Dan Jackson to be sort of the strong safety, physical safety, the guy that comes up and makes plays in the box. We'll see how that changes as Janelle Guerrero gets healthy and comes back. But the fact that they're able in game 1 against Clemson to find that many reps for KJ Bolden because of Malaki Starks' versatility is going to have a benefit to Georgia at the end of the season.
We'll get to that interception. Don't you worry about it. Just hold on to it for now. We got this. All right, moving on. Let's talk about Jared Wilson. I feel like it's really hard to follow in the steps of SBP. But as Kirby Smart said earlier this week in his press conferences, no errant snaps. He did immediately come up to Kirby after the game saying that he made a few mistakes, but admitted to them. I feel like that says a lot about him as a player, and I don't think we could have asked for a better performance out of him in game 1.
Yeah, you like what you saw there out of the offensive line. I think as the game wore on, obviously they had some struggles in the first half, but they weren't really running it up the interior. And part of that is Clemson's defensive line, I think could well be the best defensive line that Georgia plays this season. And the fact that that offensive line got better as the game went on, they wore the opponent down, I think should instill a lot of confidence in this group and what they're going to be able to do. So for Jared Wilson to go out there and his first career start and play that well and have an offensive line get better as the game goes, you hope that the offensive line gels and gets better as the season goes as well. I think that's going to play big dividends. One thing to keep an eye on, Georgia did not rotate at the guards, I think, at the frequency that a lot of people expected. Michael Morris only played 7 snaps. They kept Dylan Fairchild mostly at left guard and Tate Ratledge mostly at right guard. I'll be interested in seeing how often they rotate there and whether part of that is a byproduct of you have a new center and you want to get him as comfortable as he can. So having veterans like Fairchild and Ratledge play may come at the expense of Morris, who maybe as Wilson gets more comfortable, they begin to bring him back into the fold there.
All right, last thing on this, we will do a little bit of Tennessee Tech talk, but from this angle. So I think that the most important thing from the Georgia side is to keep players as healthy as possible, get them rested before we start this SEC game stretch. But apart from health, what are the things that UGA needs to focus on the most in this game from a skill standpoint?
Getting young players reps. I think there's been so much talk about Georgia's schedule this season, and with it being more difficult, you might find it harder to find those games where you get young players reps. So, and not just young players, but backups as well. I think this is a massive week for Gunnar Stockton. He's going to have an opportunity. I think I would not be surprised if you see Gunnar inserted with the first team offense in the second half on Saturday, and they try and see what Gunnar can do. You think back to what Carson was able to do against Vanderbilt in 2022. I think that gave people, and Carson in particular, a lot of confidence in terms of what he'd be able to do when he was one day the starter. If North Georgia's own Gunnar Stockton is going to one day be a starting quarterback for Georgia, I think you need to see him go out there and play well against Tennessee Tech first, and then maybe later in the year, say against a UMass, maybe against a Florida, depending on how things go with that program. But this is a big step for guys like Gunnar Stockton, who may not play a huge role this year, but are someone that Georgia has expectations for going forward.
Emphasis on the North Georgia's own. I heard that. I felt that. All right, so last week we did our segment Meme Machine where we pick our favorite memes from the week, but we made an executive decision because, believe it or not, Connor and I do have a little bit of authority here on DawgNation at large. We just decided that with college football back and being on Twitter and seeing all the memes, it's just there's too many. Like, we can't just do it every now and then when they're so good. So from now on, we're going to make this a staple on our show. We're going to do it every week, but this time we're just going to provide one. So let's go ahead and take a look at this week's Meme Machine.
Who's that coming down the track? Who's that coming down the track? It's a mean machine and Randy Black. It's a mean machine and Randy Black.
See, the beautiful thing about, okay, hey, off your phone. We're doing a show here. Yeah. Gotcha. All right, so the beautiful thing about doing this is that now we can have Cody on for 2 segments. I would like to welcome in our producer extraordinaire who makes all this happen, so much emotional support as well. Yeah, hey Cody, what's going on?
Hey, I'm trying to figure out how I get on camera, sorry. Not much. Good. It's kind of a relaxed week. I'm not as stressed as I was a week ago. He's got Tennessee Tech, just kind of cruising.
I like to see it. All right, with that, let's go ahead and start. I will go first, followed by Cody. We'll let Connor wrap it up so he has more time to be on his phone while these first 2 picks are going on. Let's start. This is my meme pick for the week. Here we go. I wanted to pick a Georgia one so bad. We're going to probably need to get rid of the lower third there if that's okay. That way you can see the bottom. I love a simple meme like this. Simple but effective. Pentagon, hexagon, octagon, season gone. I mean, here's the thing. You spent all offseason talking about how you didn't make the 4-team playoff. Well, let me tell you, you're 2 games in, and now you're not even going to make the 12-team playoff. The only team this far to have lost games in 2 different continents. Sometimes it's the ones that don't take as much thought that end up being the best ones. So this is my meme machine pick of the week. Cody, take it away.
All right, so for my meme, I went kind of in the same vein. It's just so easy, right? Like
Too
picking
easy.
on FSU. So mine picking on FSU comes from the great movie Airplane. So it's how I foresee the rest of the FSU football playing out. And it's the scene from Airplane where they say, "You've got to pull yourself together." And everybody just keeps coming up, shaking them. And that's not the end. This is going to be the rest of the scene. "You've got to pull yourself together." Smack. And then look down the line. Here comes, it's not going to get any easier. Miami looking like they've got the big wrench. Notre Dame with the gun soak. Love getting after FSU a little bit, especially after last year and all the talk we had to hear.
I couldn't help but notice that the username on that was 321 Knowles. That's not the 321 Knowles, is it?
Oh, I don't know. 321 Knowles. Sorry.
Oh no, Cody! Let's talk. Let's talk after the show.
Yeah, you might want to avoid some red Solo cups, Cody. 2. Kaylee, Airplane is a movie that came out in 1980, widely considered one of the greatest comedies of all time. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar makes maybe the greatest athlete acting performance of all time, dragging Bill Walton and Bob Lanier up and down the court every night, busting his buns. A fantastic movie. I could tell that you were a little lost there. But my meme machine, I'm not obsessed with Florida State. So I went after Brian Kelly, who gave his best Jonah Jameson impression in his postgame. What I want is pictures of Spider-Man. Tough loss for LSU. Brian Kelly very unhappy, and I think everyone was pretty thrilled that we got that kind of performance in a postgame press conference.
Also, the water bottle mid-air. Like, what a tough... I mean, water bottles got more showing in college football press conferences this week than ever before. And, I mean, I hope water stock went up.
Yeah, hey, hydrate, don't hydrate.
I wish I could drink this one, but I can't. Not yet.
Don't touch the swamp water.
All right, that is going to wrap up our meme machine for this week. Look, we've got one more thing for you. One thing about this show... We're going to call each other out. We're going to hold each other accountable. We're all good friends here. That's what we do, so we decided to put it in a segment. This is our DawgNation at-large accountability check.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Yeah.
Jam out a little bit, right?
This is probably my favorite music that we have on any of the animations that we have so far. I love the phrase check yourself or wreck yourself. Nope, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Yep, sorry. I'm like bumping in here right now. Okay, here's the thing. I'm not going to apologize to Connor, but I only took note of the things that you were wrong about and not necessarily the things that you were correct on. So this could be a little swayed this week. Cody, do you have anything that you would like to say before we start the accountability check?
No, I think we got to call people out, good and bad. So we can start good. We'll start easy, and then we can get into the rough stuff.
Yeah, this is one that maybe perhaps you guys in particular didn't see. Maybe the rest of DawgNation saw it. I actually did say this on the DawgNation Game Day show. Why don't we just play it out? The quarterback and the captain of the defense, and I think that this is a game in which maybe we could see him have that interception like he had in his opening game versus Oregon. Neutral site right here.
Well done.
I was waiting for somebody to clap for me.
Now, is it such a long shot to say Malaki Starks might have an interception?
Ooh.
I don't know. But the way he did it was very reminiscent of Oregon, and you mentioned Oregon. Kudos to you, Kay.
Thank you. Would you want to say anything, Connor?
No.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Georgia's best secondary player coming
good.
down with an interception.
You're
like,
good.
I'm just,
We'll just let this next clip speak for itself.
like saying Georgia's going to win on Saturday. Like, yeah, okay, it's an easy prediction.
Yeah, well, predictions aren't always easy, Connor. Last week you had to pick your playoff teams. Let's take a look.
Little bit of surprise here. I have Virginia Tech as the ACC champion. I've been high on them before. And what I saw out of Florida State last week, I think is something where I just have too many concerns about what they're going to be offensively with DJ Uiagalelei as the quarterback there. I love what Kyron Drones is going to be able to do for this team. They bring back a lot of talent. And in an ACC that I have a lot of questions about, we're going to see some of those on display with Clemson on Saturday. I've got Virginia Tech coming out of the ACC.
Now, granted, they are still undefeated in the ACC. He was right about FSU, but they're making the playoff as a 4 seed still, Connor?
Yeah, they are.
I knew he was going to double down on this.
Double down, baby.
Every single
Vandy's
thing
a
you
good
heard
team.
in that
Vandy's a good
video
team.
about non-Virginia Tech teams, I was correct about. Florida State, even more questions about them offensively. Clemson, I said they were going to get exposed on Saturday. They did. I feel great about Virginia Tech winning the ACC. They should not have lost to Vanderbilt. They played poorly. I can't make up for that. I said that they were going to make the playoff because they were an ACC champion. I had one ACC team in my college football playoff. I still believe that it's going to be Virginia Tech. You can't spin zone this with me. I feel great about what I said there. And even though obviously a tough loss to start the season, I still like them winning the ACC and getting into the college football playoff.
I think that perhaps what this whole thing was supposed to be about may have gotten lost. You don't have to be defensive. We're just holding one another accountable in a very respectful fashion. It's okay. You still have plenty of time.
Yeah, to be correct. I know. That's kind of my whole point.
And Kaylee, by the way, had NC State making the playoff, not as the champion of the ACC. So they got to take on Tennessee this week. We may have to come back to this, circle back on that. But Kaylee, for now, we'll continue giving you your flowers. Here's another prediction from last week's show.
So I said earlier there could be some pettiness on this show, and this might just be the pettiness that I have in my heart. But I would love to see a Colby Young touchdown to mock Clemson for not taking any transfers.
All right.
Yeah, that's it. There's nothing to be said about that.
Again, really went out on a limb thinking Colby Young might be a touchdown. And now you probably should have stuck with that a little more later on. But you know what? Colby Young, it was beautiful. We'll see a lot more of him.
Very, very gorgeous, very mindful. But here's the thing is, even it's hard for me to admit sometimes I'm not always right. As much as I'd like to think I am, I'm not always right. So I did make sure to include one in there that I wasn't correct. I wasn't correct, but neither was Connor. So let's roll it.
It is tail.
Dylan Bell.
All right, Dylan Bell to have a touchdown.
She was quick with that. I'm going to take Oscar Dell.
I think both are very.
That was my backup pick.
You know who I would have picked?
Cash Jones. I thought about it.
All the dude does is score touchdowns. We can't wait to see. Just give me my money.
Yes.
I'll do it, and
My
you guys
bad.
should have been cheering. Yay! For all the folks watching, it's a TikTok trend. It is very popular, and that was the celebration. On the sidelines, at least, all the people were doing to Cash Jones. He was just giving the money. So Cash cashed in, and like I said, it seems like that's all he does is score touchdowns. You guys, with Dylan Bell and Oscar Delp, were incorrect. Do you want to go on the record for this week? Give me who's going to score a touchdown.
Connor, you get to go first this week.
I get to go first. I will go with Dominic Lovett. I think they find a way to get him involved early, and he gets an early touchdown.
Okay, Kaylee?
I am not. Is Trevor Etienne going to play?
Look, if you want to say Trevor Etienne and then he doesn't play,
call Kirby, see what he says to you if you ask him about it.
I feel
Don't
like.
ask him. Just don't ask him in a press conference. You know the answer.
Yeah, he doesn't talk about it.
No, respectfully, and he respects the question.
We respect that here on this show.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a flyer, and I'm going to go Trevor Etienne because I think he's going to play.
Okay.
But I will say, our minds are very similar because I thought you might take Etienne, and I had Dominic Lovett as my backup. And
You could take Dylan Bell again. I mean, there's no shame in.
Oscar Delp and
Dude,
Dylan Bell are still great choices this week. But
if it was almost touchdowns, I'd be in the lead. But it's not.
Yeah.
Cody, would you like to submit a pick this week?
I think the Frazier hype train continues to build, and they're going to get a lot of time.
Not going to double down on Cash Jones here?
Cash, I took him last week. He may score again because again, and then London Humphreys, the nose for the end zone that he had, he's running over. He's not going to be stopped, and that's the same thing with Cash Jones. I love that. I felt like last year and the year before, maybe Kendall Milton was like always the guy down at the 2, but I like the guy who's not going to be denied the end zone. So Cash is one of those. London's proven to be one of those. We'll see if Nate Frazier can do it. And if he doesn't fall down, he fell down, and then they ran the same play, and Cash Jones got the touchdown on it. So he had a chance last week to get 2.
All right, I like us switching up our picks here. Let me make note of them.
All right, I'll let you close it out.
All right. So I do want to do something different for the end of today's show today. On a little bit more of a serious note. Usually we do what we learn, but I do want to take this time to recognize what happened yesterday at Appalachia High School. I think when we were talking about it this morning, Brandon said it best about how there's 1 degree of separation between us and the victims and the victims' family. So even though it may not have personally impacted you, like I feel really bad for it all, and I thought it was important for us to acknowledge what happened. And I don't know if any of you that watched the show were affected by it, whether directly or indirectly, but we're here for you, and I don't know what we could do, but if there's anything that any of us can do to help with that, please let us know. And I know that all of us are praying behind the scenes, and it was an unfortunate situation, and I just thought that it was important for us to acknowledge that on today's show. Connor, do you have anything?
I mean, it's obviously an incredible, scary situation. My mom's a teacher. I have friends that graduated from Appalachia, and it just, it's unfortunate that this is a thing that keeps happening, and it's a reality, and it's a sad reality that it hits obviously so close to home. And specifically in the Athens area. Appalachia is not far from Athens. I drive past it on the way. I have friends in the area on Wednesday when the unfortunate tragedy took place, and it is just incredibly sad. And you hope that the community is able to heal, but those families that lost their loved ones will never properly heal from this, and it is just absolutely gutting. And so our thoughts are with all of those impacted and affected by this.
Yeah, thoughts and prayers going out. This is also just a reminder that it's times like this that we all have to lean on one another, not just our loved ones, but our friends and even those that you don't know. So DawgNation, I want to thank you all for joining us on today's show here at DawgNation at Large. We'll see you right back here next Thursday at 7 o'clock.